When Bachelorette Kaitlyn Bristowe and Jason Tartick ended their engagement, they decided to remain cordial with one another. They also decided to share custody of their two dogs, Raymond and Pinot. Fans have been questioning their arrangement since Jason started dating Kat Stickler. Jason has not been seen with the two fur babies he has lovingly called his best friends. Kaitlyn kept telling fans she would have an update for them soon. That day has come. She went on her podcast and shared the custody status of their two dogs. Keep reading to find out more. Kaitlyn Bristowe shares update on dog custody. Former Bachelorette Kaitlyn Bristowe is giving fans an update on the two dogs she shares with Jason Tartick. Pinot and Raymond were going back and forth between their two homes after their relationship ended. After not seeing Jason anywhere near the dogs recently, fans began to wonder what was going on. Kaitlyn shared on her Off the Vine podcast that she and Jason are no longer sharing joint custody of Pinot and Raymond. She was quick to say it has nothing to do with being personal or vindictive. When she and Jason started sharing the two dogs, she noticed a big change in them. Their anxiety increased and it broke her heart. She said, "It kills me to leave them whenever I travel. They have the greatest dog sitter, who comes to my house, so they don't have to leave." Kaitlyn also shared that anyone who listens to her podcast or follows her on social media knows they are literally the light of her life. She went on to say, "What I realized in sharing custody with the dogs is that they get very scared and very uncomfortable and very anxious not knowing where they're going and when they're coming back. This is not personal to anybody, and it happens when they're in one house and when they're in my house." She's not keeping them from Jason. Kaitlyn Bristowe went on to say that she contacted the agency that they adopted them both from and found out it is in the contract that they cannot go back and forth between homes. In fact, the agency even hinted they would come take the dogs back if it was going to be a problem. With all that said, she is in no way keeping Jason away from the dogs. Kaitlyn said, "I'm doing what's best for the dogs. Jason is more than welcome to see them if he is in town for the weekend or wants to take them for a walk. I would never keep them from anyone." Jason has not commented so far. When Bachelorette alum Kaitlyn Bristowe and Jason Tartick ended their engagement, they made a joint decision to remain amicable and to share custody of their two beloved dogs, Raymond and Pinot. However, since Jason began dating influencer Kat Stickler, fans have been increasingly curious about the current state of their arrangement, especially since Jason hasn't been seen with the dogs in recent months. Kaitlyn, who has always been open with her followers, promised to address the situation, and finally, in a recent episode of her Off the Vine podcast, she provided the much-anticipated update on the custody of their fur babies. Kaitlyn and Jason's relationship was beloved by fans, largely because of the couple's shared love for their dogs, Raymond and Pinot. Adopted during their time together, the two fur babies became a significant part of their lives, frequently appearing on their social media accounts. When Kaitlyn and Jason announced their split, it was clear that one of the hardest decisions was how they would manage custody of the dogs. The couple decided on a joint arrangement, allowing both of them to spend time with Raymond and Pinot, despite the emotional toll the separation had on them. At the time of their split, Kaitlyn expressed how much the dogs meant to both her and Jason, calling them the light of their lives. Raymond, with his soulful eyes, and Pinot, with his playful personality, had been part of their love story, and fans were heartened to know that they would continue to be cared for by both parties, even after the relationship ended. However, over time, fans noticed that the dogs were rarely seen with Jason, raising questions about whether the shared custody arrangement was still in place. Kaitlyn finally broke her silence on the matter in a heartfelt segment on her Off the Vine podcast, addressing the concerns of fans who were curious about the well-being of Raymond and Pinot. She confirmed that she and Jason were no longer sharing custody of the dogs. But contrary to what some might have assumed, Kaitlyn made it clear that this decision was not born out of spite or personal vendetta. Instead, it was made in the best interest of Raymond and Peanut, whose behavior and emotional well-being had been affected by the back-and-forth custody arrangement. What I realized in sharing custody with the dogs is that they get very scared and very uncomfortable and very anxious not knowing where they're going and when they're coming back, Kaitlyn shared. She elaborated on how difficult it was to see the anxiety manifest in her dogs. Raymond, in particular, struggled with the constant change in environment, and the stress of not knowing when they would return to their primary home became too much for both of them. Kaitlyn went on to explain that every time she traveled for work, leaving the dogs behind, it broke her heart. "It kills me to leave them whenever I travel. They have the greatest dog sitter, who comes to my house, so they don't have to leave," she said, emphasizing that keeping the dogs in one stable environment was the best decision for their emotional health. According to Kaitlyn, the decision to stop sharing custody wasn't easy, but it was necessary for the well-being of Raymond and Peanut. After noticing how much their anxiety had increased due to the constant change of homes, Kaitlyn consulted the adoption agency from which they had adopted the dogs. It was through this consultation that she learned about a clause in their adoption agreement that advised against frequent changes in environment for the dogs, as it could result in severe behavioral issues. The agency even suggested that if Raymond and Peanut's situation didn't improve, they might be forced to take the dogs back. Kaitlyn stressed that the decision had nothing to do with any ill will between her and Jason. "This is not personal to anybody, and it happens when they're in one house and when they're in my house," she clarified. She simply wanted to do what was best for the dogs, even if it meant being the one to take on full responsibility for their care. She expressed deep love for Raymond and Peanut, saying that anyone who listens to her podcast or follows her on social media knows they are the most important part of her life. Though the joint custody arrangement had ended, Kaitlyn made it clear that she was not keeping Jason away from the dogs. She wanted to ensure that the decision wasn't seen as her trying to restrict his access to Raymond and Peanut. In fact, she made an open offer to Jason, saying, "I'm doing what's best for the dogs. Jason is more than welcome to see them if he is in town for the weekend or wants to take them for a walk. I would never keep them from anyone." Her words carried a tone of compassion and maturity, showing that despite their breakup, her main concern remained the well-being of the animals they both loved. Kaitlyn understood how important Raymond and Peanut were to Jason, and her decision to end joint custody wasn't about creating distance between him and the dogs, but rather about ensuring their comfort and happiness. Jason, on his part, has not made any public statements regarding the updated custody arrangement. Fans had noticed that he hadn't been seen with the dogs recently, which fueled speculation about the state of their custody agreement. His silence on the matter could simply be a reflection of his desire to respect Kaitlyn's wishes, or perhaps his new relationship with Cat Stickler, which may have shifted the dynamics of his involvement with the dogs. While Kaitlyn was clearly focused on doing what was best for Raymond and Peanut, it was also evident that the decision to take full custody of the dogs wasn't without its own emotional challenges. As someone who frequently travels for work, Kaitlyn acknowledged the difficulty of leaving the dogs behind, even with trusted dog sitters. The bond she shares with her dogs runs deep, and being separated from them, even temporarily, has been one of the hardest aspects of her post-breakup life. During her podcast, she reflected on the joy and comfort the dogs brought her, particularly during the emotional turmoil of her breakup with Jason. For Kaitlyn, Raymond and Peanut had been a constant source of love and support, and their well-being had always been her top priority. "I would do anything for them," she said, "and I know Jason loves them too. This is about making sure they feel safe and secure." Kaitlyn's candidness on her podcast was met with an outpouring of support from fans. many of whom praised her for making such a difficult decision in the best interest of her dogs. While some had speculated that there might be lingering tension between her and Jason over the custody arrangement, Kaitlyn's explanation made it clear that the decision was made solely out of love for Raymond and Peanut. Fans flooded social media with messages of encouragement, commending Kaitlyn for putting her pet's well-being first. Many pet owners could relate to the stress of managing pet custody after a breakup, and Kaitlyn's transparency resonated with those who had faced similar situations. As Kaitlyn Bristowe moves forward with her life and career, her bond with Raymond and Peanut remains as strong as ever. While the end of joint custody marks a new chapter in her relationship with Jason, it also represents her unwavering commitment to the dogs she considers her family. Though Jason has not yet spoken publicly about the updated arrangement, it's clear that both he and Kaitlyn want what's best for Raymond and Peanut. And for Kaitlyn, that means ensuring they have a stable, loving environment where they can thrive without the anxiety of constantly shifting between homes. In the end, Kaitlyn's decision highlights the emotional complexities of pet custody after a breakup, and her choice to prioritize the well-being of Raymond and Peanut serves as a reminder that sometimes love means making difficult decisions. While her journey with Jason may have come to an end, her journey with her beloved dogs is far from over.